Welcome. Today we're going to be taking apart an MSI GE62VR Apache Pro gaming laptop. And to start, we're going to be using a small Phillips head bit. This is a 2.5. So we'll go ahead and flip the laptop over, and we're going to remove all of the bottom case screws, including the one underneath the warranty sticker. Alright, once you have the case screws out, we can go ahead and remove that optical drive. And then we'll finish removing the 3 smaller screws. So these are a little bit smaller. You're going to need looks like a 2.0. So just a tiny bit smaller Phillips bit to get these last 3 screws. Alright, now at the seam between the palm rest and the bottom case, just find out where they split and then use a flat tool to get in there and separate the 2 halves. And one thing to keep in mind on this model too, there is some motherboard ports hanging out of this side of the laptop, so you don't want to pull the case up because at least the audio ports are kind of poking through. So we're going to lift the bottom case up from the side of the optical drive, and that way once you have it loose, you can pull it slightly this way to clear those audio ports. That way you're not prying up against them because they're just held on by some solder connections. And now we have access to the inside of the laptop. So first we will go ahead and remove the RAM by spreading the little retainers. Then we can remove the RAM sticks. And then the SSD looks like just one small screw. And we're going to wiggle it up gently. It is held on by some adhesive, looks like thermal adhesive pads, so you might need to wiggle it a little bit and then it will come up. And same for the Wi-Fi card. We'll go ahead and remove that tape and then just pull straight up on those antennas to remove them. And we'll remove that screw. And once the card flips up a little bit, just pull it straight out. Alright, now the hard drive caddy looks like it's just a couple screws here on top. Also smaller size. So you may end up using the 2mm Phillips to remove the components. Alright, so for this you can either just remove that the speaker to get it out of the way. I'm going to finish taking off the actual hard drive caddy, because you are going to need to move the hard drive that way to release it from the SATA connector. So I'll remove the caddy and then just push that hard drive out of the SATA connector. All right, now we can go ahead and remove the battery. Looks like just one more screw retains that battery in there, and then just lift it straight out. Alright, looks like next we can go ahead and remove the CPU cooling fans and heatsink. So for this type of connector, you just want to get your fingernails underneath, little side tabs, and pull it straight up and out. Actually, it helps to kind of wiggle back and forth as you're pulling. Then we'll remove these screws for the fans. And it looks like on this side we're going to need to release the video cable first anyways, so we'll just peel back on that tape. And there's a plastic retainer that needs to flip up. So just get your fingernail underneath that, flip it upwards. And you can finish pulling that video cable out of the connector. Flip it back down. Alright, so now that we've wiggled that video cable out of the way, we can remove the last screw for the fan. And then we can also now get the screws for the heatsink. Now if you are reinstalling this heatsink, you're going to want to reinstall it, tightening the screws in the order of the numbers that are stamped on the heatsink. So after you apply the thermal paste, just go and tighten them in sequence, starting with 1, and that will help tighten the heatsink down evenly. But as far as removal, it does not matter the order. Alright, so we have the screws out and we can go ahead and start wiggling that heatsink. It's probably best to kind of support the motherboard. Sometimes the thermal paste, especially on an older laptop, it can turn into a really strong adhesive. So in order to release the heatsink, you may have to wiggle and pull a little bit. Alright, so it looks like it was pretty held on in the middle part, but just make sure you've got the screws and the connectors released, and then just keep wiggling and you'll get it out. Alright, now since we have easy access to the hinges, we'll go ahead and separate the display assembly from the palm rest. And to do that, we're going to make sure that we have the ribbons freed up. Looks like they are. And go ahead and remove the hinge screws. Alright, so once you have the hinge screws out, there is one small piece also that needs to be kind of popped off, and that is the, I guess it'd be a clutch cover. So it's just right here at the very back. And it's the long plastic strip. Just pops straight out. Alright, so now we can go ahead and swivel those hinges up. And once you have the hinges up and out of the way, go ahead and separate the display assembly from palm rest. Alright, now we can finish disassembling the palm rest assembly. We'll go ahead and get that speaker out of the way. And some of the connectors, especially like this one, are kind of hard to get to without using some kind of picking device. So just give it a good wiggle. And it should pop out. Alright, now we can finish removing whatever ribbons also remain on the motherboard. So with that type of connector, you also just flip up and it will release the ribbon. And looks like we have another connector for the DC jack. So we'll go ahead and just remove that DC jack right now. And with this type of connector, you just pull it straight out. Alright, so it looks like the ribbon for the in-out board is underneath the motherboard. So we're just going to go ahead and remove the screws for the in-out board as well. And we'll go ahead and release the ribbon from this side. Alright, quick check, no more ribbons. Alright, so once you have everything disconnected from the motherboard, go ahead and remove the rest of the screws. Alright, now same thing, we'll go ahead and just wiggle that motherboard a little bit. Make sure there's nothing kind of holding it down, and then yeah, go ahead and flip it over. It looks like there's a couple ribbons for the keyboard and touchpad underneath, so we'll go ahead and release those. And this type of connector, you just kind of slide that one part down and just repeat on both sides, and then we'll push it back up. Alright, so we have a pretty much bare palm rest. Keyboard is not removable. And the touchpad, if you plan on replacing it, you're going to need a heat gun because it's held on with some pretty strong adhesive. but it's just basically stuck with adhesive to the palm rest. Alright, now for the display. Like many other laptops, this display is opened by removing the front bezel. Depending on the model, sometimes you can just get it from the inside and start pulling back just kind of with your fingertips. This one is like that. Some of them also have adhesive around the bezel, but it looks like with this MSI, pretty easy, and we'll just go ahead and start popping this bezel off. So it looks like it does have a small bit of adhesive at the bottom. So as you're pulling, just maybe work a finger in there underneath to kind of push back that little bit of the LCD screen that's sticking to the bezel. And just kind of work your way across the bottom. And you'll have the bezel off and be able to access all of the internals of the display. Alright, so the LCD screen is held on by 4 screws, and some of them are covered with tape, so we'll need to remove that. And then hinges, looks like 4 screws on either side. So we will go ahead and remove those hinges first. And it's always a good idea to check your little fasteners, because sometimes these will work their way out of the plastic, or the plastic will crack and won't really hold the hinge anymore. That side looks good. Alright, so once you remove these screws, you can remove the hinges. So we'll work that video cable out of the little retainer right there, because as soon as we remove the screen, we're going to flip it over to remove that video cable. Alright, so once you have the screws out for the LCD, go ahead and flip it over. So this is the connector, and they're usually held on by some clear tape, some pretty strong clear tape. So you're going to want to peel that back, and then just be real careful at the end that you don't yank, because some of these are real tough, and then right at the end they'll give way and you can yank the connector out of the LCD and sometimes break the LCD. But this one's just held on by plastic, and once you have it plastic pulled back, you can pull the connector out of the LCD. Alright, now we can finish removing the video cable, which is also a combination webcam cable. So we'll go ahead and just unstick it from the back cover. And then once you get it up to the webcam, the connector is usually really small, so it can be hard to get a fingernail on it, but once you have that plastic pulled back, then it shouldn't be too hard to remove that connector. All right, for the webcam, we're going to go ahead and just lightly pry from the top. And then finish unsticking that webcam from the tape. And with the webcam, you never really want to pry from either side because they're very thin and you can bend and break them pretty easy. Alright, so we're left with the bare back cover. We have a couple Wi-Fi antennas. They're just held on by adhesive. So if those need to be replaced, you just unstick them, stick the new ones back on, and just kind of weave the cables back through the back cover. Alright, so that is how you disassemble an MSI GE62VR Apache Pro gaming laptop. If this video helped you or you liked it, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much.